This morning, in the cozy kitchen of a suburban Chicago home, I, Helen Carter, 68, stood brewing coffee, my heart heavy. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, swept in, her eyes icy, and declared, "Helen, from now on, please use the guest bathroom." Her words cut like a knife, shoving me to the sidelines of the very home I helped them keep. The guest bathroom, crammed with spotty hot water, was a stark reminder that, to them, I was invisible. I smiled, nodded, but inside, I was reeling. They thought I was a broke old lady living off their charity. They had no clue that behind my calm facade, I hid a jaw-dropping secret. 20 real estate properties, worth millions, an empire I built from scratch. As Sophia walked away, I gripped my coffee mug, anger flaring. They wanted me to fade away? I'd show them Helen Carter was not someone to underestimate. The kitchen, once the heart of our family, now felt like a stage where I was forced to play the role of a meek old woman. Sophia, in her pricey silk robe, didn't glance back as she left, leaving me with a cooling cup of coffee. I stood there, her footsteps fading on the hardwood, each one hammering my self-respect. 8 months ago, I sold my beloved Evanston home, where my late husband, George, and I raised our son, James, and made memories for 30 years. I moved here to their house not out of desperation, but to be near my granddaughter, Lily, to feel the warmth of family after George's passing. I'd given James and Sophia a hefty chunk from the sale to help pay their mortgage, thinking it would bring us closer. Now I realized they saw me as a burden, an old lady to be managed. I sat at the small dining table where Lily usually scribbled drawings and chattered about unicorns. Today it was empty, save for the ticking wall clock, counting down my dwindling patience. Guest bathroom. Those two words echoed in my mind, not just a request, but a symbol of my place here. A forgotten corner, an afterthought. I pictured that bathroom, chipped tiles, a rusty faucet, a sink so tiny I could barely fit my shampoo bottle. Compared to the main bathroom, with its soaking tub and gleaming mirror, Sophia primped in every morning. The guest bathroom was an insult, but the real sting wasn't the inconvenience. It was what it meant. Sophia didn't just want me to use a different bathroom. She wanted me to know I didn't belong in their inner circle. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness mild compared to the sting of being dismissed. I thought of James, my son, once a little boy chasing me through the backyard, begging for one more bedtime story. Now, at 38, he was a real estate agent, always glued to calls and contracts. James didn't ask me to use the guest bathroom, but he didn't object when Sophia suggested it. His silence, I realized, hurt more than her words. I'd raised him, sacrificed for him, and now he let his wife push me aside like I was some outdated piece of furniture. But they didn't know. No one in this house knew that Helen Carter wasn't some retiree scraping by on a pension. For 40 years, I'd built a real estate empire, starting with a modest duplex in West Chicago, bought with meager savings when James was a toddler. I learned to negotiate, renovate, and manage properties, often working late after James was asleep. When George was alive, he called me his real estate wizard, beaming every time I closed a new deal. After he passed, I channeled my grief into ambition, growing my portfolio to 20 properties, from Lakeview condos to a Minnesota strip mall. My annual net income was $320,000, 0 cents, not to mention millions in asset value. I never bragged, never needed anyone to know, because to me, wealth wasn't for show, it was for independence. I stood, rinsed my mug, and headed to my room. This house, legally James and Sophia's, was mostly paid for by me. They thought I sold my home because I couldn't afford to live alone, but the truth was I chose to be here for Lily. That 6-year-old, with her radiant smile and endless questions, was why I stayed. I wanted to watch her grow, to be the one telling her fairy tales like I did for James. But now I wondered, Was it worth it when the cost was my dignity? In my room, I opened my laptop and logged into my property management system. The screen listed my assets. A Lakeview condo just leased for $3,000, 0 cents a month. An Indiana storefront with a new long-term tenant. A Minnesota plot awaiting construction approval. Each property was a story, proof of my grit and smarts. I scrolled through the numbers, a familiar sense of power stirring. They could shove me into the guest bathroom, but they couldn't take what I'd built. I closed the laptop, gazing out the window at sunlight filtering through the trees. Sophia and James were out there, living their lives, thinking they had me figured out. But they didn't know that every time I smiled at their demands, I was holding back a fire. I remembered George's words, "Helen, you're too patient. Sometimes you gotta show the world how strong you are." I'd been patient long enough. The anger in me wasn't just about the bathroom. It was about being made invisible, deemed weak because of my age. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted them to understand Helen Carter was not someone to forget. I grabbed my phone and texted Michael, my property manager of 15 years. "Michael, I need to discuss a new project. Call me when you're free." As I hit send, a plan took shape. Not to boast or hurt anyone, but to reclaim my place, not just in this house, but in my own life. The guest bathroom might be the starting point, but this story, I knew, would end in a way no one expected. The next morning, I woke to faint sunlight slipping through the curtains, but yesterday's weight still pressed on my chest. Sophia's guest bathroom decree echoed in my mind, a discordant tune I couldn't shake. I, Helen Carter, 68, had thought I could endure, that I could smile and carry on for Lily, for family. But as I stepped into the kitchen and saw Sophia scrolling her phone, her face indifferent, I knew this was just the beginning. I poured coffee, forcing a soft tone. "Morning, Sophia. Has Lily woken up?" She glanced at me, her eyes skimming over me like I was part of the furniture. "Not yet, Helen. I don't think you need to make breakfast today. I've got cereal for Lily to keep things healthier." Her words, polite on the surface, stung like a slap. Even the small joy of cooking for my granddaughter was being taken away. In the days that followed, disrespect crept into every corner of the house, like weeds overtaking a garden. One evening, as I read in the living room, Sophia sauntered in, a glass of red wine in hand. "Helen, James, and I want private time at dinner from now on. Could you eat earlier, say 5 p.m.? I looked up, my book frozen in my hands. "Sure," I said, my voice steady, though inside I wanted to scream, "Eating earlier, like a child on a schedule." I stared at her with her sleek hair and condescending tone, wondering when I'd become an outsider in the home I'd helped save. It didn't stop there. A week later, James called me to the backyard, where my old car sat under the harsh sun. "Mom, we got a new BMW for Sophia," he said, pride in his voice. "Could you park on the street so she can use the garage? It'd be easier for us." I eyed my reliable Toyota, my companion through years of deals, and nodded. "All right, James." But as I turned away, my face burned. They weren't just taking my space in the house. Even the smallest things, like a parking spot, were being stripped away. Did they think I didn't deserve comfort just because I was 68? Things got worse one afternoon when Sophia sat across from me at the dining table, a budget list in hand. "Helen, James, and I reviewed our finances," she began, her voice sweet but sharp. "We think you could chip in more for groceries. You eat quite a bit and prices are rising." I blinked, wondering if I'd misheard. Me, who'd given them tens of thousands to save their home, was now being asked to pay for food like a tenant. "I'll consider it," I said, keeping my tone even, but my hands clenched under the table. Sophia smiled, clearly pleased I didn't push back, then left, leaving me with a burning sense of humiliation. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the wind whistling outside. Sophia's words, James's silence, their dismissal of me as a burden swirled in my mind. I thought of George, who'd said, "Helen, you're the strongest person I know, but sometimes you need to show the world." I'd been patient, yielding, but that patience now felt like a cage, trapping my self-respect. I got up, opened my laptop, and logged into my property management system. The screen showed 20 properties, from Lakeview condos to a Minnesota strip mall, generating $320,000, 0 cents a year. Each number reminded me I wasn't the dependent old lady they imagined. The tension peaked one evening as we sat around the dinner table, discussing Lily's birthday party. "We're renting the community center," Sophia said, slicing her salmon with surgical precision. "Our house isn't big enough." James nodded. "It'll cost a bit, but it's worth it for Lily." I spoke up, softly. "I'd be happy to help pay." They exchanged a look. That silent couple's code I knew too well. "That's sweet, Helen," Sophia said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But we don't want you dipping into your retirement." James added, "You've helped enough. We know you need to save." I gripped my fork, feeling stripped of even the right to contribute. They thought I was here because I was broke, when I could buy that community center outright if I wanted. As I stood to leave the table, I overheard Sophia whisper to James, "We need to talk about expectations. Your mom thinks she has more money than she does." James replied, "Maybe we should manage her finances. Old folks get scammed easily." Those words, though quiet, were a final blow. I paused on the stairs, clutching the railing, my blood boiling. They didn't just underestimate me, they wanted to control me. As if I were a clueless child, I looked at my hands, the ones that had signed dozens of real estate contracts, built an empire from nothing. They wanted to manage my millions? They, who struggled to fund a birthday party, thought they could handle my wealth? In my room, I opened my laptop, scrolling through my properties. The Lakeview condo, leased for $3,000, 0 cents a month. The Minnesota land, awaiting construction. Each was a victory, proof of my strength. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, resolve rising. I'd let their disrespect go too far, too long. George called me a fire, and that fire was now ablaze. I texted Michael, my property manager. "Prep a renovation plan, start with the guest bathroom." As I hit send, I knew I wasn't just fixing a room. I was reclaiming myself. That text to Michael was a turning point. The moment the fire I'd suppressed roared to life. I, Helen Carter, 68, was done being the quiet old lady in this Chicago suburban home. In the days that followed, I worked discreetly, coordinating with Michael and contractors, planning not for revenge, but to remind James, Sophia, and myself who I was. They carried on, oblivious, piling on more unfair demands, asking me to stay out of the kitchen when they had guests, suggesting I babysit Lily on weekends so they could unwind. Each time, I smiled, nodded, but inside I counted down to the moment everything would change. They thought they knew Helen Carter, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. On a crisp Wednesday morning, the doorbell rang as I sipped coffee in the kitchen. Sophia, still in her silk robe, called out, "Helen, can you get the door?" I stood, calm, but with a racing heart, knowing what was coming. When I opened the door, Tony, my contractor of 20 years, stood there, tablet in hand, his usual friendly grin. "Morning, Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice carrying. "I'm here for the guest bathroom renovation you ordered." Sophia rushed over, hair a mess, face pale. "Sorry, there's a mistake. We didn't order any renovation." Tony checked his tablet, shaking his head. "No mistake. Helen Carter, this address. Full guest bathroom overhaul. Premium tiles. Rain shower. Heated floors. Total cost, $50,000, 0 cents. Silence fell. Sophia's jaw dropped and I stood there, a slight smile on my face, feeling like I just opened a window after a storm. James barreled down the stairs, shirt half buttoned, voice frantic. "What's going on?" Tony, unfazed, continued, "Oh, and the landscaping company wants to confirm the infinity pool install next week. Hot tub, sleek design. Mrs. Carter's got great taste." Sophia swayed, clutching the doorframe. "A pool?" James echoed, his voice faint, like he couldn't trust his ears. I stepped forward, my tone even but sharp. No mistake. I'm renovating the guest bathroom, since that's where I'm supposed to be. As for the pool, it'll boost the house's value. Sophia stammered, "You can't put a pool in our backyard?" I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Why not?" "I'm covering the cost." Tony, still tapping his tablet, added, "Records show Mrs. Carter owns this house. We've worked on her other property." Sophia's face went ashen, and James looked like he'd been punched. "Other properties?" he whispered. I pulled out my phone, opened my property management app, and showed them. The screen listed 20 assets, from Lakeview condos to a Minnesota strip mall, complete with photos, rental rates, and maintenance schedules. "This is my portfolio," I said, my voice steady but powerful. "Net income $320,000, 0 cents a year, plus millions in assets. I'm not here because I'm broke. I'm here for Lily." Sophia blinked rapidly like she was waking from a nightmare. James muttered, "Mom, you're rich." I smiled, correcting him. "I prefer financially secure." In that moment, the anger, pain, and humiliation I'd carried melted away, replaced by liberation. They'd thought me a burden, an old lady needing pity. But now they faced the truth. I was one of the most respected real estate investors in the region. Tony, still there, broke the silence. "So, Mrs. Carter, shall I start measuring the bathroom?" I nodded, and he walked off, leaving James and Sophia frozen like statues. Sophia tried to speak, but only managed incoherent sounds. James looked at me, eyes full of regret. "Mom, why didn't you say anything?" I replied, my voice low. "I shouldn't have to prove myself." "But you both went too far." The story didn't end there. The next afternoon, a local news van pulled up, initially to investigate a neighbor's noise complaint about the construction. But when a worker tipped them off about my story, they knocked on my door. "Mrs. Carter, we hear you're a secret real estate mogul," a young reporter said, eyes gleaming. "How'd you build this empire at 68? I invited them in, sat in the living room, and shared my journey. From that first duplex bought with savings to today's 20 properties. I didn't boast, just told the truth, but their wide-eyed reactions showed me my story was bigger than I'd thought. That evening, the news aired on the local channel, headlined, "68-year-old grandma stuns with million-dollar real estate empire." Neighbors who once pitied me now saw me differently. Mrs. Henderson, who'd suggested I apply for senior utility assistance, called to apologize and asked if I'd share investment tips. Others, from the mailman to my bank teller, started calling me the real estate queen with admiring smiles. At home, the air was heavier. Sophia avoided me, and James kept asking, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I just said, "I wanted you to respect me as your mom, not for my money." But the truth was out, and there was no going back. The guest bathroom, once a badge of my shame, began its transformation the next day. I watched workers rip out old tiles, install a rain shower, and marble floors, feeling like I was rebuilding my own dignity. The infinity pool, initially just an idea, was greenlit, and I knew it'd be the home's centerpiece. Not just for its beauty, but for what it represented. My transformation. I wasn't just reclaiming space, I was reclaiming my right to be me. The truth about my real estate empire shook this Chicago suburban home like an earthquake no one saw coming. After Tony, the contractor, revealed the guest bathroom and infinity pool plans, after the news broadcast my story to the community, James and Sophia stopped seeing me as a meek old lady. But the truth, though freeing, left a heavy silence. Sophia avoided me, slipping through the kitchen without a word, while James gave me looks of guilt and confusion. I stood by the window, watching workers tear down the guest bathroom, feeling the invisible wall between me and my family start to crumble. I didn't want to win or get even. I just wanted respect. Not for my money, but for being Helen, their mom, their grandma. The next day, as afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, Sophia walked into the living room where I was reading to Lily. My 6-year-old granddaughter snuggled in my lap, giggling as I mimicked a rabbit's voice. Sophia stood there, hands clasped, her usual arrogance gone. "Helen," she started, her voice shaky, I need to talk." I set the book down, set Lily for water, and met Sophia's eyes. "All right," I said, calm but cautious. She sat, staring at the floor. "I was wrong. I thought you needed us, that you were frail. I didn't know who you are, and I'm sorry." Her apology, though late, was like a cool breeze easing my lingering anger. I nodded, waiting. "I was selfish," she admitted, eyes tearing up. "I was scared of losing control, so I pushed you away, but now I see how strong you are. I want to learn from you." I looked at Sophia, the woman who told me to use the guest bathroom, who'd whispered to James that I needed managing. But now, she wasn't the haughty daughter-in-law. She was a mom, a wife, trying to make things right. "Sophia," I said, my voice low but sincere, "I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here for Lily, for family. But I need respect, not as an investor, but as a person, a mother." She nodded, wiping tears. "I get it. I'll do better." In that moment, I felt part of the wall between us fall, not just because of her words, but because of the rare honesty in her eyes. James came next. That evening, he knocked on my door, holding 2 steaming mugs of tea, a habit he'd picked up from me as a kid. "Mom," he began, sitting on the bed's edge, "I don't know what to say. I let Sophia go too far, and I didn't see who you really are." I sipped my tea, letting him continue. "I work in real estate, but I never thought you were a legend. I'm ashamed I underestimated you." His words, though painful, carried the sincerity I'd longed for. "James," I replied, "I don't need you to admire my money. I just want you to see me as a person, not a burden." He nodded, eyes misty. "I'll do better, Mom. I want you to teach me not just about real estate, but how to be strong like you." From then on, I set clear boundaries. One evening, as we all sat around the dinner table, the first time since everything blew up, I laid it out. "I'm here because I choose to be, not because I need to. If I feel disrespected, I'll leave. I can afford to live anywhere." James and Sophia nodded, no objections. I looked at Lily, sketching a house with a pool in crayon, and knew I stayed for her, but I wouldn't let my dignity take another hit. The change wasn't instant, but it ran deep. Sophia, once all about yoga and wine, started asking about real estate. One afternoon, she brought her laptop, opened my property list, and asked, "How do you know this condo's a good investment?" I smiled, pointing at the screen. "Research, Sophia. Location, market demand, and a bit of gut." She took notes. Her eyes lit with a curiosity I'd never seen. I taught her to read market reports, negotiate with tenants, and soon she enrolled in a real estate course. Months later, she became my partner on a small project, a duplex in Evanston. As we signed the deal, she looked at me smiling. "Helen, I never thought I could do this. Thank you." I nodded, feeling like I'd reclaimed part of our family. James changed too. He started seeking my advice on his real estate deals, no longer seeing me as old mom, but as an expert. Once he brought a contract and asked, "What do you think of this Indiana lot?" I reviewed it, flagged some risks, and he listened, jotting notes. "You're a genius, Mom," he said, half joking. I laughed. "Not a genius, just experienced." Through those talks, James and I rebuilt our bond, not just as mother and son, but as colleagues who respected each other. The guest bathroom, once a badge of my shame, was now stunning. Marble floors, a rain shower, a gold-rimmed mirror. I stood there, seeing a new Helen Carter in the reflection. Not the quiet old lady, but the woman who'd reclaimed her worth. The infinity pool, finished weeks later, shimmered at sunset, a gathering spot for the family. Lily squealed as she jumped in, and Sophia and James, though hesitant at first, joined. One evening by the pool, Sophia said, "Helen, this pool." It changes everything. I nodded. It's not the pool, it's how we see each other. Lily, my little granddaughter, felt the shift too. She started calling me Super Gran, bragging to friends that my grandma owns a whole building. I chuckled, hugging her, knowing I wasn't just changing my family, but planting seeds for Lily to grow up with a strong female role model, unbound by age. Our family, once fractured, was now stronger. Not because of money, but because of newfound respect and understanding. That family healing brought a new warmth to our Chicago suburban home, where I, Helen Carter, 68, had once been relegated to the guest bathroom. That bathroom was now a showpiece, the infinity pool a sparkling centerpiece. But what I cherished most was the respect from James, Sophia, and Lily's proud gaze. Yet, my story didn't end within these walls. It rippled outward like waves from the pool, touching people I never imagined I'd inspire. One morning, I got an email from a local university inviting me to speak about real estate investing at a seminar for students and retirees. I hesitated, wondering if a 68-year-old grandma could hold a crowd. But standing in that auditorium, facing eager eyes, I shared my journey from my first duplex to a 20-property empire. I talked about late nights, studying markets, my failures, and how I turned the pain of losing George into drive. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. A young student asked, "You started over at 60. How do you not fear it's too late?" I smiled. It's never too late if you believe in your worth. Neighbors who once pitied me now sought my advice. Mrs. Henderson, who'd suggested I apply for senior aid, became my most eager student. I guided her to buy her first rental, and when she signed the deal, she grabbed my hand. "Helen, you made me believe I could start over." I realized I wasn't just sharing knowledge, I was sparking faith that age doesn't define ability. My story, spread by that news segment, inspired other seniors. A group of older women formed an investment club, dubbing me their trailblazer. I laughed, but deep down, I knew I'd shifted how our community viewed aging. At home, Lily was my brightest light. Now proudly calling me Super Gran, she drew a picture of our house with the pool, captioned, "My Gran can do anything." I hung it in my room, a reminder I stayed for her, but also for me. Sophia, now my investment partner, and James, learning from me as a pro, showed me family could thrive on respect. One evening, by the pool, Lily asked, "Gran, were you ever scared?" I stroked her hair. "Sure, sweetheart. But I learned to demand respect, and that's the greatest strength." Looking back, this journey wasn't just about revealing my wealth. It was about reclaiming my dignity, challenging stereotypes, and inspiring others. From a dismissed grandma, I became a symbol of independence. The infinity pool, glowing at dusk, wasn't just a structure. It was proof of my family's transformation and mine. As I stood there, a gentle breeze blowing, I smiled, ready for new ventures, not just in real estate, but in helping others find their own strength.